episode number 180 of the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. I'm Michelle, a fertility acupuncturist here to provide you with resources on how to create a wholesome approach to your fertility journey. Welcome to the Wholesome Fertility Podcast. Today I wanted to talk about a topic that was inspired by one of my patients. I just had a really long, wonderful conversation with one of my patients. It was definitely a real conversation. She's going through the IVF process and just how sometimes going through the IVF process, it takes you out of your own self or intuition or your own center. Because you go from, if you have like a spiritual practice or even a practice of centering, something that you do where you're in tune with yourself and you know what's right within yourself, to sometimes hearing about just numbers and statistics and trying to apply that or predict your future based on somebody else's future or background or history, because that's ultimately what science is. It's taking a bunch of numbers or studies on other people who are not you and assuming how you're going to do based on that. And while that can be very, very helpful, it can also cause a lot of doubt in one's own journey. And I've seen that happen so many times. And many people coming to me being given diagnosis or prognosis that ends up not being accurate. And my belief, and I talk about this a lot, is that a person's belief is so vital in how they're going to do, to the point where there have been actual studies that show that a practitioner's belief in you will actually impact how you end up doing. And this really works to the placebo effect. The placebo effect is so real that it's impacted how studies are done. So people can have sugar pills and get the same effects as the actual medicine. And what does that tell you is that the belief in that medicine, even though it's not really medicine, actually impacts the body. So we know that a person's belief is not just a random thing. It's not just something that you either have one way or the other and it makes no difference. A person's belief is everything. It really impacts a person's outcome. And when a doctor does not believe that a person can do well or that they're going to get better, then the person himself or herself will respond to that if they 100% trust what the doctor says. And I have had patients that trusted themselves over the voice of the doctor. Not that it didn't hurt and not that it didn't make them question, but something didn't feel right and they trusted their own gut and they listened to that feeling that this isn't really aligning with me. What I'm hearing right now at the doctor's office is not aligning with me. And then also on the other hand, I've had patients who have needed IVF and have gone on to a different doctor who really did have belief in their process and their ability to get pregnant and their ability to succeed, even though they had a lot of things go against their process in the past, or they didn't go by their past. They actually believed that if they changed the protocol or did something a little different, that they would do better. And they ultimately do better. So it really has an impact on the psychology. So my point in talking about this today is because I want to really send the message that your belief is so important. And because of that, it's important that you protect your energy, your spirit, and your emotions if you are going through any type of fertility treatment. And not just the treatment, but even going through the fertility journey and really believing in your body. So this could be applied to somebody who's trying naturally, or somebody who's doing IUI or IVF, or even egg donor, because there, throughout the whole process, you don't know how things are going to end up. And even with the egg donor, you don't have a guarantee. Nobody has the guarantee. And ultimately, part of it is relinquishing control and having faith in the process, which is very hard. I'm 100% on that. So there's no, it's much easier said than done. It's not something that is easy to do. And it is important, though, that you fill your cup in some way, whether it's spiritually, emotionally, just really impacting your mind, allowing your mind to have some space throughout the process so that you can get back into yourself. Because your intuition is a real thing. Intuition is a real thing. That's also been studied. There have been studies done where people were shown images, and what they found was that people's responses were measured. And if it was an image of something that caused fear or happiness or joy, just all different emotions, what happened was they would study the heart rate and take an EEG, which reads brain waves. What they found was that people would actually have the response that was appropriate to the image before they actually saw the image, which means that there was some intuition or some premonition or some feeling that people had. So there are definitely studies that show that people do actually have intuition. And I'm listening to an audiobook right now about woo woo being real, and it's actually very fascinating. It's called Why Woo Woo Works, and the author gives a ton of research for things that were really not believed in, or they were kind of assumed were quackery in the past. And what he says is that it's basically just not understood. It's not that it doesn't exist. It just because it hasn't been understood or proven doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think that ultimately it's great to study things. It's great to have things in numbers. It's great to have science. However, when it starts to take us away from our own internal dialogue or science that we have within ourselves, our own internal guide, when we're relying only on our senses to know how life works, then it's really undermining our own strengths as people with our gifts to know what's right for us. And I've had many conversations where people have felt internally like something wasn't right, and they went with that feeling and ended up having a much better outcome, and then realizing why after the fact, when they actually started to uncover why they, ultimately they saw the big picture. And that typically happens after the fact when you're not in it. When you're in it, it's very hard to see what's going to happen afterwards. They always say we don't have future vision, we have backwards vision. We can always look back and see how things unfold, but we just don't have that future vision. But what we do have is intuition. Again, it's something that has been studied, and little by little, we're actually gaining more insight scientifically. But just because we're getting insight doesn't mean we shouldn't know or listen to our gut without the insight or the proof, because even our eyesight can only pick up on certain vibrations and waves. So ultimately, just relying on that would be limiting ourselves. Now, when you are going through the journey, what you'll find is you're getting a lot of information. You go to get tests and you get numbers, and you almost feel like you're getting back a test score. And that sometimes can really crush your spirit. It can really drain your energy. And when your energy gets drained, you don't really operate from a place of clarity. You feel more frazzled. It throws you off balance. And so ultimately, what I always suggest to my patients and for people that I work with is finding ways to fill your cup so that you don't allow that process to take you away from your center. And by center, I mean just being in a state of mind where you're feeling more whole with yourself, being in a state of mind where you feel more clear. When you're off center, you feel literally off balance. Things start to not make sense. And then you start to get so frazzled within yourself and in a state of a little bit more confusion that you feel the need to rely on outside sources for answers. And it's important to have a marriage between the two, because it's important to have information from the outside. It is important to get tested. It's important to get that information, but it's also important to be centered within yourself and be still connected with your inner voice and not allow all the outside noise to take you away from yourself. Because ultimately, what happens is you start to feel almost like a leakage of your own sense of self and spirit. And this is what I find from speaking to so many people, and this is really what I hear from a lot of my patients and the people I work with, is that they feel so drained. They feel like they've lost a part of themselves and they're suffering through the journey. And from working with people, I have seen also people going through the same journey and eventually filling their cup enough where they're still going through the challenges. They still face their ups and downs, but there's less suffering in the process and there's more clarity in the process. And the reason why I say this to you is because I want to at least give you the hope that that can exist. It can coexist. You can have the unknowns, you can have the uncertainty, but you can also feel whole or more whole. Not, nobody's 100% whole, but more whole in the process, where you have a sense of balance on your feet and it's not as shaky, if that makes sense. And I think it does make sense because most of my patients, that's what they tell me. And it is something that I see across the board. Everybody is unique. Everybody has their own thresholds. But that is something that I do see across the board. And I'll tell you why. When people do go through the process and they start going to the doctors, I see a lot of people telling me that they come back feeling defeated because you start to get those test scores, those numbers. You feel like you failed the test. You get the terms being thrown at you: poor ovarian reserve, poor responders, failed cycles, and you hear all these different terms, and eventually that will, impact your psyche, and with good reason. I would imagine only a robot can go through that and not have some kind of impact. So the reason why I want to mention this and kind of as a reminder is that, number one, if you are going through this, you are not alone. A lot of people feel the same way. A lot of people feel defeated going through this journey, hearing those things. So what I was going to say, going back again, I lost my track, is that it feels very much like watching the news, kind of like coming from a place where you came back from a retreat and you're taking care of your body, and then all of a sudden you get thrown into like the news events. And sometimes people say don't watch the news because it really messes with your psyche and how you feel, and it puts you in this fear mode of this black and white, the good and bad. And it's very similar to that psyche. It's two different things, but it's similar to that psyche. When you go, everything becomes about numbers, and then everything becomes about statistics. And then those statistics based on other people are kind of given to you as a forecast of what, based on your numbers, you're going to do. And again, I have seen those people defy those odds that were given to them many times, not just a few times, many times. Enough so that I feel strongly to get this message out so that, in the back of your mind, you realize that that does not necessarily have to be your story. It doesn't have to be your story. And that's number one. And obviously there's no guarantee, and I'm not here to give false hope at all. But I'm just letting you know it's not false. I mean, these are based on true stories and things that I've seen. And also to give yourself through this journey a way to fill your cup, a way to fill your soul and charge your battery. And don't let go of the things that give you joy. Don't put that on hold. It's sometimes we have this human tendency to say, I'll be better if, I can relax if. And you're never going to get to that if. You're never going to get to that if, because people do get to that if, the pregnancy. Okay, so then they get pregnant and then they're anxious throughout the pregnancy. So, and then they're anxious when the baby's born because they're worried about, early life. You want to make sure that everything's okay. So that if never comes. That if never comes. So it's important to learn to live with that uncertainty and at the same time feed your soul, because you deserve to have your battery charged. You deserve to do that. You don't have to wait until you think you're in this perfect opportunity to do so. You can actually do that. And it doesn't have to take a lot. It could take journaling or taking some time in the day, even 2 minutes of getting silent and saying positive things to yourself, thanking your body, doing something to give yourself some kind of peace or some kind of space so that you can feed and recharge that battery, whatever it is that makes you feel more centered in yourself. So think about things like really, and a lot of times it's the most simple things that can bring you back to yourself. And think about what it is that has made you happy. It could be riding a bike. It could be going hiking. It could be just literally closing your eyes and imagining yourself. If you're in the dead of winter and you cannot go somewhere warm where that's your favorite thing to do, go to the beach, close your eyes and see yourself in your favorite place, because your mind cannot distinguish the difference between something that's imagined or something that's happening. It is very similar to the mind. So that's why visualizations work so well. You can imagine taking a really juicy lemon, and if you really get into that mental movie, your mouth will water. Your mouth doesn't just water randomly. So it's responding to that thought. If you're physiologically responding to a thought, that means that your thought can impact your physiology. So putting yourself in that state will impact you physiologically and also will make you feel that peace that you so deserve to have going through this journey. And so that is really the message that I want to bring out today, is just not to forget yourself, not to forget your soul, to really keep that in mind, because you deserve to feel ease. You deserve to charge your battery. You deserve it, and so much more. And it's so, you're going through all of this, all of the little details that drain you. Every single part of it drains you. It drains you financially, emotionally, physically, in every way. And you deserve to fill that cup back. And when you do actually do that, it's going to make you feel better physically. It's going to make you feel better emotionally. You're going to give yourself more of a chance of doing well, because mentally you're going to have more clarity. You'll feel more guided to doing what's right. You'll have a little bit more clarity in that sense that you feel charged. When you feel charged, think about your phone. It works a lot more clear, more strong, more sharp when it's charged. And one of the best ways to charge yourself, I know that this isn't something that everybody feels that they resonate with, but I highly recommend at least trying. Try to start a meditation practice. It really is anti-aging. It actually scientifically has been shown to slow down the aging process. And that's one of the biggest things with fertility. A lot of times people will say your eggs are too old, which I think is complete BS. Eggs, if you do the right things, you can increase the quality of your eggs. So to me, if you're anti-aging, if you're slowing down the aging process, you are improving and impacting your egg quality. So meditation is a win-win. Not only is it going to be amazing for you physically, not only is it going to help your fertility, It's going to help your mind. It's going to help your life. It's incredible. It really has so many benefits. And now it's not woo-woo, like I mentioned before. It really is not woo-woo. It's based in science. It really has shown and proven itself. So I hope that in some way I have inspired you to start putting yourself first, taking care of your mind and your well-being, so that this journey could be a little easier to digest than if you're running on empty. It's so important to take care of yourself. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and have a beautiful day. So that concludes today's episode. You can find all of the links mentioned on the episode notes. If you're enjoying these episodes, please take a moment to share and leave a review. Reviews mean everything to podcasters, and I really enjoy hearing from my listeners. You can also find me on my website at www.thewholesomelotus.com or email me at info@thewholesomelotus.com. I love hearing from my listeners. If you're interested and want updates as well as a free ebook on my top 10 fertility boosting habits, you can visit my fertility page on www.thewholesomelotus.com. I thank you so much for listening in and hope that you have a beautiful day.